The gunshot echoed through the dusty plains of Whisper Creek as Bridget Sullivan sprinted across the arid landscape, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. The year was 1878, and the territory of Wyoming had never felt so vast and unforgiving. Her breath came in ragged gasps, the taste of iron on her tongue from running for what seemed like hours. The bounty hunters were persistent. They always were when there was money involved. Bridget's dress was torn at the hem, her boots worn from the miles of desperate fleeing. The setting sun cast long shadows across the land, turning the horizon into a canvas of fiery orange and gold. The beauty of it all was lost on her as she stumbled toward the small cluster of buildings that made up the outskirts of Destiny Falls, a frontier town barely clinging to existence in the harsh wilderness. The sound of hooves thundering against packed earth made her dive behind a large boulder, pressing her back against the cool stone. She closed her eyes, willing her breathing to quiet, listening to the riders pass by. They were getting closer with each day that passed. "They'll be back," she whispered to herself, reaching into her pocket to clutch the small gold locket, the only thing she had left from her previous life, a life she could barely remember now after 3 years on the run. When darkness finally fell, Bridget made her way cautiously into town. Destiny Falls was like most frontier settlements, a main street lined with a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and various other establishments necessary for survival in the untamed West. Oil lamps cast pools of yellow light onto the wooden walkways, and the sounds of piano music and raucous laughter drifted from the saloon. She needed shelter, food, and most importantly, a plan. The last town had been a mistake. Staying 3 months had made her complacent, allowed people to notice her, remember her face. It wouldn't happen again. The Rusty Nail Saloon was busy that night, as it was most nights in a town where diversions were few. Bridget slipped inside, keeping her head down, the bonnet she wore casting shadows across her face. She found a corner table and sat with her back to the wall, watching the room through lowered lashes. "What'll it be, miss?" A barmaid with tired eyes and a kind smile approached her table. "Water, please," Bridget replied softly. "And perhaps information about work in town?" The woman nodded. "Water's free. As for work, you might want to talk to Martha at the hotel. She's always looking for help with the cleaning and such." Bridget thanked her, relief washing over her face. Work meant money, and money meant the ability to keep moving when the time came. As the barmaid walked away, the saloon doors swung open, and a tall figure strode in, bringing with him the scent of leather, horse, and the wild prairie wind. He removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair and a face weathered by years under the harsh frontier sun. Garrett North was a man of few words but many deeds. His reputation as one of the finest horse trainers and ranch hands in the territory preceded him. At 32, he had seen more of life's harshness than most men twice his age. The thin scar running along his jawline told of encounters with those who had mistaken his quiet nature for weakness, a mistake they had lived to regret. He nodded to the barkeeper, who immediately poured a whiskey and slid it across the counter. Garrett took it with a grateful nod, his gaze sweeping the room out of habit, years of survival instinct making him catalog each face, each potential threat or ally. His eyes paused on Bridget, noting the way she held herself, poised for flight like a cornered deer. There was something in her posture that spoke to him, the wariness, the vigilance. He recognized a kindred spirit, someone who understood what it meant to always be looking over their shoulder. Bridget felt his gaze and looked up, momentarily meeting his eyes before quickly looking away. But in that brief connection, something passed between them, an unspoken understanding. 3 days later, Bridget had secured work at the Destiny Falls Hotel, cleaning rooms, and helping in the kitchen. Martha, the hotel proprietor, was a widow who ran the establishment with efficiency and compassion. She asked few questions, which suited Bridget perfectly. "You're a hard worker," Martha commented one afternoon as they folded fresh linens. "Most girls your age." "What are you, 22? 23, Bridget corrected softly. "Most girls your age would be looking for a husband, not scrubbing floors in a frontier hotel." Bridget kept her eyes on her work. "Some of us aren't meant for that life." Martha studied her for a moment. "Everyone's running from something, child. In this wild country, we all have pasts we'd rather forget." Later that evening, as Bridget carried a bucket of water from the well behind the hotel, she nearly collided with a solid form in the darkness. "Excuse me, madam," came a deep voice, and she looked up to see the cowboy from the saloon. Up close, his features were even more striking, strong jawline, eyes the color of a summer storm, with crow's feet at the corners that spoke of both laughter and hardship. "Mr. North," she said, recognizing him from the conversations she'd overheard at the hotel. He seemed surprised that she knew his name. "You have me at a disadvantage, Miss Sullivan," she said after a slight hesitation. "Bridget Sullivan. Can I help you with that?" He gestured to the heavy bucket. "I can manage," she replied, but her arms were already aching from the day's labor. He took the bucket anyway, his hand brushing against hers momentarily. "You're new to Destiny Falls." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes, just passing through, really. Most people are." He walked beside her back toward the hotel. "This country doesn't encourage putting down roots unless you're stubborn as an old oak." "Are you stubborn as an old oak?" The question surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "According to some, my ranch is about 5 miles east of town. Not much, but it's mine." They reached the back door of the hotel, and he set the bucket down carefully. "Thank you, Mr. North." "Garrett," he corrected. "Mr. North was my father, and he's been gone these 10 years now." "Garrett," she repeated, the name feeling somehow right on her lips. "Good night, Miss Sullivan." He tipped his hat and turned to leave, then paused. "Martha mentioned you're good with numbers, helping her with the books." Bridget tensed slightly. She'd been careful not to reveal too much of her education. "Simple arithmetic. Nothing special. My ranch hand broke his writing arm last week. I could use someone to help with some correspondence and accounts. Pays better than hotel work." She studied him, searching for ulterior motives, but finding only straightforward offer in his steady gaze. "I'll consider it," she said finally. He nodded once. "I'll be back in town on Friday." As he walked away, disappearing into the gathering dusk, Bridget felt something stir within her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just the dangerous allure of connection. Friday arrived, and with it came the rain, a rare blessing in the arid territory. Bridget stood under the hotel's awning, watching the water turn the dusty street into mud, breathing in the fresh scent that temporarily masked the usual frontier town smells of horse, sweat, and whiskey. "Miss Sullivan." Garrett's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him standing there, his coat darkened by rain, hat dripping at the brim. "Mr. North, Garrett. Have you given any thought to my offer?" She had thought of little else for days, weighing the risks against the rewards. Working at his ranch would mean isolation, away from town where bounty hunters might look first. But it would also mean being alone with this man she barely knew. "I have," she said carefully. "I accept, with conditions." His eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Name them." "I'll need my own quarters. I'll work daylight hours only. And I can leave at any time, no questions asked." Something in his expression told her he understood there was more to her caution than propriety. "Agreed. When can you start?" "I'll need to give Martha a week's notice. She's been kind to me." "A week, then." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small advance payment. "For your time." Their fingers brushed again as she took the money, and this time the contact lingered a moment longer than necessary. Bridget felt a flush creep up her neck and cursed herself for it. Attachment was a luxury she couldn't afford. The week passed quickly. Martha was understanding about her departure, even seemed pleased that Bridget had found better employment. "Garrett North is a good man," she said as they shared tea on Bridget's last evening at the hotel. "Keeps to himself mostly, but fair and honest. Lost his wife to childbirth some years back. The baby, too. He doesn't speak of it." Bridget absorbed this information silently, adding it to the little she knew about the quiet cowboy who had hired her. True to his word, Garrett arrived the following morning to collect her. He had brought an extra horse, a gentle mare with intelligent eyes. "She's called Penny," he said as he helped Bridget mount. "Steady as they come." The ride to the ranch took just over an hour. As they crested a small hill, Bridget saw it spread out before them, a modest but well-maintained homestead with a main house, a barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. A stream ran nearby, explaining the surprising number of trees surrounding the property, a small oasis in the otherwise open rangeland. "It's beautiful," she said, genuinely impressed. "It's home," he replied simply. As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, tall, lanky, with graying hair and a pronounced limp. "Took you long enough," he called out. "Miss Sullivan, this is Henry. He's been with me since I started this place." "Henry, Miss Bridget Sullivan. She'll be helping with the books and correspondence until your arm heals." Henry tipped his hat with his good arm. "Madam, don't let this one work you too hard." He jerked his thumb at Garrett. "Man doesn't know the meaning of rest." Garrett ignored the comment and helped Bridget dismount. "I'll show you to your quarters." Her accommodations were simple but clean, a small cabin that had once been used for storage, now outfitted with a bed, a desk, a washstand, and a small stove for heating. It was separated from the main house by about 50 yards, giving her the privacy she had requested. "It's not much," Garrett said, standing in the doorway as she inspected the space. "It's perfect," she replied honestly. After years of running, having any space to call her own, even temporarily, felt like a luxury. Life at the North Ranch quickly settled into a rhythm. Bridget spent her mornings organizing correspondence, balancing accounts, and writing letters that Garrett dictated primarily to cattle buyers and suppliers. His business was modest but successful, focused on raising and training quality horses while running a small herd of cattle for supplementary income. In the afternoons, she often found herself drawn outside, watching as Garrett worked with the horses. There was something mesmerizing about the way he moved among them, his voice a low, constant murmur that seemed to calm even the most skittish colt. "You have a way with them," she commented one day, leaning against the corral fence. He glanced up, seeming almost embarrassed to be caught in this gentle interaction. "Horses are honest. They don't lie or pretend. Treat them right, they'll do the same. Is that your philosophy for people too?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He was quiet for a moment, running a brush along the flank of a chestnut mare. "People are more complicated, but I reckon the principle holds." 2 weeks into her stay, disaster nearly struck. Bridget was hanging laundry when she heard the distinct sound of approaching riders. Peering around the corner of the cabin, she saw 3 men making their way toward the ranch house. Her blood ran cold as she recognized one of them, a bounty hunter who had nearly caught her in Colorado the previous year. Dropping the laundry, she rushed inside her cabin, heart pounding. Should she run? Hide? The decision was made for her when a knock came at her door moments later. "Miss Sullivan?" It was Garrett. "We have visitors. Cattle buyers from Cheyenne. I could use your help with the ledgers." She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. "I'll be right there," she called, forcing her voice to remain even. When she entered the main house, the 3 men were seated at the dining table, hats resting beside them. Up close, she realized her mistake. The man resembled the bounty hunter, but wasn't him. Relief flooded through her, making her lightheaded. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Sullivan, my bookkeeper," Garrett introduced her. The oldest of the men, a portly fellow with mutton chops, nodded politely. "Madam, unusual to see a lady doing figures in these parts." "Miss Sullivan has a head for numbers that would put most bankers to shame," Garrett replied, his tone brooking no argument. The meeting proceeded without incident, but afterward, Bridget couldn't shake her unease. Garrett found her later that evening, sitting on the small porch of her cabin, staring at the sunset. "You seemed troubled earlier," he said, remaining standing at the bottom of the steps. She considered deflecting, but something about his direct gaze made her opt for a partial truth. "One of your visitors reminded me of someone I'd rather forget." He nodded, accepting this without pushing for details. "We all have ghosts. Some ghosts are more persistent than others," she murmured. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I'm riding to the North Pasture tomorrow. It's good country, clear air, few people. You might like to come along." The invitation surprised her. "I'm not much of a rider. Penny will take care of you. Sometimes it helps to put distance between yourself and your troubles, even for a day." She found herself nodding. "Thank you. I'd like that." The next day dawned clear and cool, the kind of autumn morning that hinted at the winter to come. They rode north, following the stream that ran by the ranch until it widened into a small river. The landscape opened up into rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen, the latter beginning to turn golden with the season. They stopped to rest the horses near a stand of aspens, the leaves shimmering like coins in the gentle breeze. Bridget breathed deeply, feeling some of the tension leave her body for the first time in years. "It's so quiet here," she said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them during the ride. Garrett nodded, handing her a canteen. "That's why I chose this land. Far enough from town to avoid most trouble, close enough when supplies are needed." "Is that why you came west? For the solitude?" He considered the question as he scanned the horizon, a habit she'd noticed he never abandoned, even in seemingly safe territory. "Partly," he finally answered. After the war, the East felt too crowded with memories. Too many reminders of what was lost. "You fought in the war?" She studied him with new interest. "Union cavalry. Joined in '63. Fought until Appomattox." He absently touched the scar on his jawline. "Came west after, like many men with no home to return to." "And your wife?" The question was forward, but their isolation seemed to allow for a frankness that wouldn't be possible back at the ranch. Pain flickered across his features, quickly controlled. "Met her in '67. Emma. She was a schoolteacher in a settlement near Denver. We were married a year later." He paused, his gaze distant. "She died in '71, trying to bring our son into the world." He followed her an hour later. "I'm sorry," Bridget said softly, understanding now the shadows she sometimes saw in his eyes. He nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy. "Life continues. We endure." He looked at her then, his gaze direct. "And you? What drove you to a place like Destiny Falls, working for room and board when your education clearly prepared you for more?" She tensed, the familiar fear returning. "What makes you think I'm educated?" "Your handwriting. Your vocabulary. The way you correct my grammar when you think I won't notice." A hint of amusement touched his lips. Bridget looked away, focusing on the distant mountains. "People assume too much based on appearances." "They do," he agreed. "For instance, most would look at me and see just another weather-beaten cowboy. They wouldn't know I studied literature at Harvard before the war." Her head snapped back toward him, surprise evident on her face. "Harvard? You?" Now he did smile, the expression transforming his features. "Is it so difficult to believe a cowboy might appreciate Shakespeare?" "To be or not to be," she quoted softly. "That is the question," he finished. "Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them." The words hung between them, taking on new meaning in the wilderness context. "I've been taking arms and running for a long time," Bridget admitted, surprising herself with the confession. He didn't press for details, instead offering, "Running gets tiresome eventually." "So does fighting," she countered. "True enough." He rose, extending a hand to help her up. "We should head back. Storm brewing to the west." She took his hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet. Their hands remained joined a moment longer than necessary, and something shifted between them, a recognition, an acknowledgement of shared understanding that went beyond words. The approaching storm caught them halfway back to the ranch, the sky darkening dramatically as thunder rolled across the plains. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, and Garrett led them to an old line shack used during cattle drives. The small, one-room structure was basic but dry, with a small fireplace, a rough-hewn table, and 2 chairs. Garrett quickly got a fire going while Bridget wrung water from her hair and skirts. "We'll wait it out here," he said, removing his drenched coat and hanging it near the fire. "These autumn storms usually blow through quickly." Bridget nodded, accepting the blanket he offered from a trunk in the corner. "You come prepared." "In this country, being unprepared can mean death," he replied matter-of-factly. "I keep all the line shacks stocked." They sat in comfortable silence as the storm raged outside, the rain drumming on the roof, occasional flashes of lightning illuminating the small space. Bridget found herself studying Garrett's profile in these brief moments of brightness, the strong line of his jaw, the slight crook in his nose that suggested it had been broken at least once, the way his eyes reflected the firelight. "You're staring, Miss Sullivan," he said without turning his head. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was just thinking. A dangerous pastime." Now he did look at her, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. "My father used to say the same thing, especially about women thinking." "Your father sounds like a man of conventional wisdom." "He was a man of many opinions, few of them kind. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Garrett studied her face. Is he one of the ghosts you're running from? The question was direct, but his tone remained gentle. Bridget looked away, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. My father died 3 years ago, she said finally. He was a banker in St. Louis. Respected. Powerful. Cruel behind closed doors. She paused, weighing how much to reveal. He arranged a marriage for me to one of his business associates, a man 40 years my senior with a reputation for breaking his previous wives. Garrett's expression darkened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. I refused. He beat me severely, locked me in my room until the wedding day. Her voice became distant, as if she were recounting someone else's story. That night, he came to ensure I would be compliant for the ceremony the next day. He was drunk. We struggled. He fell against the fireplace mantel. She closed her eyes briefly. The authorities called it an accident, but his partner, my intended husband, knew better. He's been hunting me ever since, claiming I stole family heirlooms before I fled. Did you? Steal from him? She met his gaze defiantly. Only what was rightfully mine. My mother's jewelry. Some money from my father's safe that I had helped him count countless times. Enough to start a new life somewhere he couldn't find me. 3 years is a long time to hunt someone. Some men cannot bear to be defied, especially by a woman. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Each time I think I'm free, his men appear. I move on. It's become a pattern I can't seem to break. You could seek legal protection. A bitter laugh escaped her. The law favors men like James Blackwell. He's donated generously to every judge and sheriff from St. Louis to Denver. Garrett fell silent, considering her words. Outside, the storm was beginning to abate, the thunder now distant rumbles. What will you do when Henry's arm heals? Move on again, he finally asked. The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Bridget realized with a start that she had been avoiding thinking about leaving the ranch, about leaving him. I don't know, she admitted quietly. I'm tired of running. Then stop. She looked at him sharply. It's not that simple. Few worthwhile things are. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. I have connections in this territory. The governor owes me a favor from when I tracked down the men who robbed the territorial treasury. You could petition for protection, for a legal declaration regarding your father's death. Hope flared briefly in her chest before reality extinguished it. Blackwell would find a way around it. His reach is long, longer than a man's will to protect what's his. The intensity in Garrett's voice made her breath catch. What are you saying? He held her gaze steadily. I'm saying that perhaps it's time to stand and fight rather than run, and that you wouldn't have to do it alone. The implication of his words hung in the air between them. Bridget felt something shift inside her, a wall beginning to crumble, a door long closed starting to open. Why would you risk yourself for me? You barely know me. I know enough, he replied simply. I know you're brave and intelligent. I know you work hard and have a kind heart, despite what life has dealt you. I know that when you think no one is watching, you smile at the songbirds that nest in the eaves of your cabin. The fact that he had noticed such a small detail stunned her into silence. And I know, he continued softly, that for the first time since Emma died, I find myself thinking about tomorrow as something more than just another day to survive. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving only the sound of water dripping from the eaves and the occasional crack of the fire. Bridget felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by emotions she had kept carefully contained for years. I don't even know who I am anymore, she whispered. Bridget Sullivan is just another name I've used. I've had so many, I sometimes forget which one is real. Garrett reached across the space between them, his hand covering hers. Then who were you before? Before all the running began. She swallowed hard. Beatrice Summers. But that girl died the night her father did. Did she? Or did she just get lost along the way? Beatrice looked down at their joined hands. I've been so many people these past years. None of them feel like me anymore. Then be someone new. Someone true. His voice was gentle but firm. You don't have to face this alone. I have no name worth keeping, she said, the words catching in her throat as tears finally spilled onto her cheeks. The cowboy's grip on her hand tightened, his eyes never leaving hers. Take mine and hold it proud. The simple statement, delivered with such quiet certainty, broke something loose inside her. A sob escaped her lips, and suddenly he was beside her, strong arms enfolding her as years of fear, loneliness, and constant vigilance poured out in a flood of tears. "I hardly know you," she managed between sobs. "Then stay and learn," he murmured against her hair. "Stay and let me learn you in return." When her tears finally subsided, she pulled back slightly, embarrassed by her outburst. Garrett gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. "I'm not proposing marriage this minute," he said, a hint of humor in his voice. "Though I admit the thought has crossed my mind more than once these past weeks. I'm offering sanctuary, partnership, a chance to stop running and start living. And if Blackwell finds me, then we face him together. This is my land, my territory. Here, his money won't buy him the protection he's accustomed to." She searched his face, looking for doubt or deception, but finding only steadfast resolve. "You would do this for a woman you've known less than a month. Some things don't require years to know." His hand moved to cup her cheek. "Some things you recognize instantly, like coming home to a place you've never been before." The truth of his words resonated within her. Since arriving at his ranch, she had felt a sense of rightness, of belonging, that had eluded her for years. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Only fools aren't afraid when facing real danger," he replied. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it." She nodded slowly, a decision forming. "If I stay, if I stop running, I want to be Beatrice again. The real me, not the shadow I've become." "Beatrice," he repeated, as if testing the name. "It suits you better than Bridget." A small smile curved her lips. "It means she who brings happiness in Latin." "An apt name, then." His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "You've brought light back to this place. To me." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken possibilities. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward. Their lips met in a kiss that began gently but quickly deepened, years of loneliness and longing fueling a connection that both recognized as rare and precious. When they finally parted, breathing heavily, Beatrice felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her. For the first time in 3 years, she was thinking of the future as something to build rather than simply survive. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now," Garrett said, rising and offering his hand, "we ride home. Tomorrow, we send a telegraph to the governor. And then we wait for Blackwell to make his move, because men like him always do. And when he comes? When he comes, he'll find not a frightened young woman alone, but a woman with allies, with legal standing in the territory, and with a man who would die before letting harm come to her." His expression was fierce in its certainty. She took his hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet. "I won't have you dying for me, Garrett North." A slow smile spread across his face. "Then I'll have to live for you instead, Beatrice Summers. Though I hope one day soon you might consider a different surname." The days that followed took on a new quality, a sense of purpose rather than merely marking time. True to his word, Garrett sent telegrams to the territorial governor and to a lawyer friend in Cheyenne. Affidavits were prepared documenting the circumstances of her father's death and Blackwell's subsequent harassment. Henry, upon learning the situation, revealed that before his ranching days, he had been a Pinkerton detective. Retired after taking a bullet in the hip, he explained, patting his bad leg. "But I still have contacts. We'll set up a network, get advance warning if Blackwell or his men enter the territory." Autumn deepened toward winter. The ranch prepared for the cold months ahead, hay stored, cattle moved to sheltered pastures, supplies laid in. Through it all, Beatrice found herself becoming more integrated into the daily rhythm of ranch life, her role expanding beyond bookkeeping to true partnership. Their relationship deepened as well. Garrett began courting her properly, with an old-fashioned formality that touched her deeply. They shared dinners, long rides across his land, and endless conversations beside the fire in the main house. He read Shakespeare to her, and she taught him to play chess. They discovered in each other not just passion, but friendship, a meeting of minds as well as hearts. Word came back from the governor. Her petition was granted. She was legally declared innocent of any wrongdoing in her father's death, and a territorial protection order was issued against Blackwell. "It won't stop him completely," Garrett cautioned as they celebrated the news. "But it removes his legal leverage. He can't claim to be pursuing a fugitive anymore. It's more protection than I've had in years, she replied, squeezing his hand gratefully. December arrived with the first heavy snow, transforming the ranch into a winter wonderland. On Christmas Eve, with Henry tactfully retiring early, Garrett led Beatrice to the fireplace in the main house. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew not a ring, as she had half expected, but a small, carved wooden box. "Open it." Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a brand new sheriff's badge. Her brow furrowed in confusion. "I don't understand. The town council met last week," he explained, a smile playing at his lips. "Destiny Falls has been without a proper law enforcement since Sheriff Taylor died last spring. They've appointed me as the new sheriff, effective January 1st. You? But the ranch, Henry will manage it, with your help. He's been wanting more responsibility anyway." He took her hand in his. "This badge means I'll have official authority to protect not just you, but the whole community. Blackwell will face more than just a rancher. If he comes for you, he'll face the law." Tears welled in her eyes. "You're doing this for me. For you. For us. For the future we could build here." He reached into his pocket again, this time withdrawing a simple gold band. "I know it's been only a few months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Beatrice Summers, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of making this ranch a true home? Of facing whatever comes our way together?" The tears spilled over as she nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. "How did you know my size?" she managed finally. He grinned. "I may have borrowed one of your gloves and had the blacksmith's wife measure it." She laughed through her tears, then grew serious. "Garrett, are you absolutely certain? Blackwell won't give up easily. By marrying me, you're making yourself a target." "Let him come," Garrett said simply. "Some things are worth fighting for. You taught me that." They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in a small ceremony at the ranch. Martha from the hotel came, as did the minister from Destiny Falls and a handful of neighbors. Henry stood as Garrett's best man, beaming proudly despite his gruff exterior. Beatrice wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her make, with sprigs of dried lavender in her hair. As she spoke her vows, she felt the last pieces of her old self, the frightened, running woman, fall away, replaced by a newfound strength and certainty. "I, Beatrice Summers, take you, Garrett North, to be my lawfully wedded husband." The words rang with promise and commitment. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Garrett kissed her with such tenderness that several of the guests discreetly wiped away tears. "Mrs. North," he murmured against her lips. "Sheriff North," she replied with a smile. Winter passed in a haze of newlywed bliss, the threat of Blackwell temporarily receding into the background as they built their life together. Garrett divided his time between his duties as sheriff and the ranch, while Beatrice took on more responsibility for the business side of the ranch operations. Spring arrived with its promise of renewal. The land turned green, wildflowers dotted the prairie, and Beatrice discovered she was with child. When she told Garrett, his joy was tempered with fear, memories of Emma's fate clearly haunting him. Beatrice held his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. "This is not then, and I am not Emma," she said firmly. "We'll take every precaution, but I refuse to live in fear of what might happen." He nodded, pressing his forehead to hers. "You're right. Every day is a risk, but that's no reason not to embrace life fully." As her pregnancy progressed, so too did the ranch's prosperity. Garrett's reputation as a fair but firm sheriff spread throughout the territory, bringing a new stability to Destiny Falls. Henry's management, combined with Beatrice's head for business, saw the ranch operations expand to include a successful breeding program for their horses. It was high summer, with Beatrice 7 months along, when the confrontation they had been anticipating finally came. James Blackwell arrived in Destiny Falls with 4 hired guns, making no secret of his presence or his intentions. He checked into the hotel, inquired openly about the sheriff's woman, and settled in to wait. Word reached the ranch within hours, their network of allies functioning exactly as planned. Garrett immediately moved to implement the strategy they had developed months earlier. "You'll go to the Wallace farm," he told Beatrice as she packed a small bag. "Sarah Wallace is a midwife. She'll look after you." 6 of our neighbors will be stationed around their property. And you? She asked, though she already knew the answer. I'll be in town, wearing the badge, doing my job. His expression was grim but determined. She placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her palm. Promise me you'll be careful. Our child needs a father. He covered her hand with his own. I promise. But Blackwell needs to be dealt with once and for all. We can't spend our lives waiting for him to strike. Beatrice nodded, understanding the truth of his words. End this, then come back to me. He kissed her fiercely, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. Always. The confrontation, when it came, was both more and less dramatic than anticipated. Blackwell, overconfident and underestimating the changed circumstances, approached Garrett openly in the Rusty Nail Saloon, his hired guns flanking him. Sheriff North, he said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. I understand you're harboring a fugitive, a murderous young woman who goes by many names. The saloon fell silent, every patron aware of the tension crackling in the air. Garrett remained seated, seemingly relaxed though his hand rested near his holstered pistol. No fugitives in my jurisdiction, Mr. Blackwell. Just law-abiding citizens. You know who I mean. The girl who murdered her father and stole family heirlooms. She's calling herself Beatrice Summers these days, I believe. Blackwell's smile didn't reach his cold eyes. Or perhaps Mrs. North now. My wife is indeed Beatrice North, Garrett replied calmly. She has legal standing in this territory, including a formal declaration from the governor regarding the accidental death of her father. Blackwell's smile faltered slightly. Clever. But documents can be challenged, especially when signed under false pretenses. They can, Garrett agreed, in a court of law, not at gunpoint in a saloon. He finally stood, his height allowing him to look down slightly at Blackwell. Now, you have 2 choices. You can leave Destiny Falls peacefully, or you can spend the night in my jail for threatening an officer of the law and disturbing the peace. A muscle ticked in Blackwell's jaw. You're making a grave mistake, Sheriff. I have influence far beyond this backwater territory. Perhaps, but here and now, I'm the law. Garrett's voice remained even. And I'm giving you until sundown to be on your way. The standoff lasted several tense seconds before one of Blackwell's men made a fatal error, reaching for his gun. Garrett's reaction was lightning fast, his pistol clearing leather and firing before the hired gun could level his weapon. Chaos erupted. 2 of Blackwell's other men drew their weapons, only to be cut down by shots from the bartender and one of the regular patrons, both of whom had been quietly prepared for this possibility. The 4th man wisely raised his hands in surrender. Blackwell himself stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and fury as his carefully constructed plan collapsed around him. It's over, Garrett said, his pistol now trained steadily on Blackwell's chest. You'll stand trial for conspiracy to commit murder, among other charges. This isn't justice, Blackwell spat as Garrett handcuffed him. This is frontier barbarism. No, Garrett replied quietly. Justice is allowing a woman to live free from fear. Justice is protecting the innocent from the powerful who would harm them. You've had justice delayed, Mr. Blackwell, but it's caught up to you at last. True to his word, Garrett ensured that Blackwell faced a fair trial, with evidence presented from St. Louis and testimonies from others who had suffered at his hands. The verdict was decisive, guilty on multiple counts, with a sentence of 20 years in the territorial prison. When Garrett finally returned to the Wallace farm to collect Beatrice, the relief that washed over her face made his heart clench. She rushed into his arms as fast as her pregnant state would allow. It's done, he murmured into her hair. Truly done. He can't hurt you anymore. 2 months later, their daughter was born after a difficult but ultimately successful labor. They named her Emma Hope North, honoring the past while embracing the future. As Beatrice held their daughter, with Garrett sitting beside them on the bed, his arm protectively around both his wife and child, she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. I never imagined this, she said softly, watching their daughter's tiny hand grasp Garrett's finger. When I was running, I couldn't see beyond the next day, the next town. And now? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. She looked around their bedroom, at the home they had built together, then back to the miracle in her arms. Now I see everything. A lifetime. A legacy. She leaned into his embrace. A name worth keeping. North, he said, a smile in his voice. North, she agreed. True as the compass, steady as the pole star. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. Thank you for finding me when I was lost. Thank you for staying when you could have run, he countered. For being brave enough to stop running and start living. Outside their window, the Wyoming sunset painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, a fitting backdrop to the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, a future built on love, trust, and a name proudly shared.